Hello, I'm Darren Clarke, a photographer from rural Warwickshire. My practice prior to now dwelled within the precincts of observational and candid street photography, as well as creating more documentary focused work, for example, my heavy metal project, visualising the world of vintage ploughing matches, which was produced in the Collaborations and Professional Locations module. During my MA, my poetics have changed. This I owe to tutorship, research, and collaboration. Whereas I've spent the last two modules wrestling with the fear of meeting this forthcoming project head on, I now know that this was probably down to my limited ability to convey an appropriate discourse through semiotic and ontological discussion. When your most deeply held beliefs are challenged, many of the most biologically basic brain systems, those responsible for protecting us, kick into gear. This can happen when one is faced, as I was, in a highly traumatic situation regarding my daughter's development of psychosis and her 3 attempts to end her life caused by what was later diagnosed as borderline personality disorder. This project is entitled Gethsemane. Its title is undeniably provocative, as the story of Jesus suffering at the foot of the Mount of Olives within this garden no doubt has its hallowed position with people of faith. For me, though, the title embodies my own experiences of remoteness and contemplation. Also, for me, Gethsemane has other signifiers. As sheep farming is deeply inherent in my own environment, this also draws comparison to the thousands of lambs that were sacrificed during Passover at the temple above Gethsemane. This blood ran down through the garden into the dark and murky Kidron brook beneath. The Holy Bible indeed has its fair share of metaphor, as does photography. The narrative is suggestive of place, space, belief, politics, power, and healing. This is conveyed through my rural environment where I live, and the spaces where I grieve for something that seemed, due to my burgeoning depression, impending or inevitable. Places I felt safe to interrogate myself and be interrogated by the land and its significance to me. Sekula reminds us the photograph, as it stands alone, presents merely the possibility of meaning. I questioned the ontology of the landscape and found new perspectives. In the paper The Ontology of Landscapes, Andrzejewski and Salva interrogate scenic ontology and find shortcomings. First, it reduces landscape to visuality, since it favours sight but virtually ignores the other senses. And second, it misrepresents the relationship with people and their surroundings. They eschew the belief of aesthetics as the dominant philosophical approach, as in many cases aesthetic theories don't provide an explicit ontological account of what landscapes are. They support their belief further by proposing an alternative environmental ontology, where the main idea is what we call landscape is not actually an object but rather a special way of experiencing an environment. So aesthetics would be a singular component in how to experience an environment. They contend that by dissociating the idea of landscape from aesthetic appreciation will make aesthetic theories of landscape more sensitive to experiences other than aesthetic ones. My work on this project aimed to provoke a sense of wide open space, and also embedded within our signifiers that question faith and a sense of sword art, I wanted to make distinct images that were beyond the ingrained aesthetic values of archetypal landscape photography. So upon researching perspective via the work of David Hockney, I discovered the uniqueness of ancient Oriental art in the short film A Day on the Grand Canal with the Emperor of China, taking the viewer through a 17th century Chinese skull painting by Wang Hui that predates the introduction of Western perspective to Asia. Here you'll find no vanishing points, no shadows, and no long story for the viewer. Whilst my images on this project, of course, do include some vanishing points and shadows, I wanted to create a sense of vastness, part beauty and part desolation, as an antidote to the confined aspect ratios often used to encode such emotions. This is where I invested in a super wide lens to convey this sense of scale and place. Once I'd come up with a project, I found myself being inspired by lectures from this module, including the discussion of materiality in the digital age, which led me to consider the format of my finished output. In line with my Gethsemane narrative, I considered augmenting the images with extra provenance by hand finishing them with sheep's blood. This took me into a new territory. Anna Cecilia Alvarez writes, artists use blood in their work to physicalize its stakes, to add to its aura. There's something risky about using blood, something dangerous in its potential impurity. Art that's splattered with blood shocks us back into our corporeality. Through field research, I discovered a way to enable this blood to be used both ethically and practically. I found a supplier of donor sheep blood that had been defibrinated to remove coagulants that would normally make the process problematic. To gain more inspiration, I visited the canons of visceral artists Andres Serrano and Hermann Nietzsche. While I find their work intriguing in their gratuitousness, their practices offer little to my narrative. Concentrating on using the medium of animal blood in art, I became enamoured with the charismatic poetics of Peter Beard, who handworked blood into his images. And in more recent times, Jordan Eagles has won fans and critics alike for his use of animal blood. My proposing to use animal blood has been received understandably with mixed responses. I've done the heavy lifting of research and I remain open to using this medium purely on the basis of its use adding aesthetic merit and not disrupting the narrative. One thing is for certain, the line between negotiated and oppositional reading will be blurred. During this module, I've been drawn to the landscapes of Todd Heido. Katja Tilevich writes, persistent in Heido's work is the idea of coming back to an emotion, if not a place, despite leaving, but this time with the weight of experience, maybe even a sort of resignation to the cyclical nature of the mind. Heido's works are free of any indications of time, or worse yet, times gone by. These photographs are not nostalgic, that they have the immediacy of the unexpected. My intentions for this project have evolved during the process and will no doubt continue to be nuanced by time. Thanks for watching.